Hello and welcome to the first episode of Calcio Corner, your weekly dive into all things Serie A. I'm your host, Gianmarco, and I'm so happy to finally be able to bring you this project that I've been working on. Before getting into the action, I wanted to explain how the show is going to be structured and what type of things you can kind of expect from us over here. Let's get into it. The show's going to be split into two parts, with the first one, it's going to be covering every game of the game week and analyzing what happened and especially why that happened, while also looking at some of the weekly news, things such as injuries, maybe manager sackings eventually, that sort of thing. And then in the second part of the show, we're going to switch it up. That's where we're going to get into our bag a little bit with a weekly topic. These could be things such as rankings, tier lists, or as today's episode format is, naming one thing that's most important for every team in a certain category. That could be things such as the team's most important player, the team's best young player, or something like this. And then when it's going to be tier list, it's going to be ranking those. So for example, ranking which manager is the best in the Serie A, putting those into tier lists, and maybe new transfers, things like this. So we're definitely gonna have a little bit more fun with it. So don't forget to always stick around for the second half of the show. With today's show, we're gonna be covering each team's most important X factor for them to perform well in this final stretch of the season. So definitely stick around for that one. We got into our bag, as I said, a little bit, and it's going to be really fun for sure. But regardless of the topic, however, you can always expect all 20 teams to be covered in each episode. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, even Monza is going to be covered. I know. They're having a historically bad season, but we've somehow managed to find things to keep you entertained with and things to talk about them and how their season is going. But jokes aside, I really hope you do enjoy this first episode. If you do, there's a couple of things you can do. Drop us a 5-star rating and maybe a comment, just so we know you enjoyed it. You can tell us a little bit of what you thought. And, maybe you didn't enjoy it, or maybe there was things you thought we could change, things you thought we could, let's say, alter a little bit just to make the episode more fun, more nice for you to listen to, let's say. So definitely we're open to suggestions. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify and click the notification bell so you always know when the next episode drops. We're also going to be opening a Twitter account, or X, in the near future, so be on the lookout for that one. Follow us on there. We'll be posting probably live reactions to the games and to some news that drops, so be on the lookout for that as well. But all right, that's enough yapping for now. Let's get into the first part of the episode, the game week recap. All right, so the first game we had this week was Lecce against Como. And yeah, this went about just as everybody expected to, let's say. Even though on paper it looks as if Como struggled to maybe get the second goal since they got it really late, Goldaniga scoring that header in the 84th minute. There wasn't really any big drama in this game. It wasn't really much contested or anything like this. I would say Como had the upper hand for the majority of the time. And Lecce never looked like creating anything too dangerous that could trouble Como for real. They did have a couple of shots, but Butaz, the keeper, has come in and replaced Reina and Audero, and has done a really good job in doing so, I have to say. He was given the best rating on FOTMob, for example, but they did pretty well. I would say that this match really highlights something that's been kind of a theme in Lecce's season this year, which has been the lack of really any creativity going forward. They really struggle to link the midfield and the defense to the attack. Kristovic, I have to say, he's having an insane season considering the amount of service that he gets, really, I've got to say. In Pierotti and Tete Morente, they have two wingers who, in my eyes, especially in this game, you could see it with Tete Morente. Yes, he was creating a lot of chances and he was going to shoot, but a lot of these chances that he was creating were very low XG shots, most of the time outside of the box. And I would say that's a theme of this Lecce attack, is every single one of their players is quite selfish in a way. They only look to create for each other. I don't think the team has many assists as a whole, and if it wasn't for Gallo or Ramadani, who at least try to look to pass to their teammates a little bit more, Tete Morente in this game especially, he was very much looking to create only for himself. So that's a problem, and that's something they have to look into. Lecce, I have to say, got really lucky with Empoli and Venezia drawing, because off the back of this performance, it would not have been very surprising to see them drop into the relegation zone. But yeah, let's talk about some positives. We're only starting off of negatives so far. So let's talk about some positives in this game. Obviously, Como played a really great game. They shocked me as they didn't have as much control of the game as I thought they were going to have. Lecce showed a lot of, they were trying to control the game, especially towards the start and at the very end after Como scored their second goal, which is understandable, of course. But yeah, Como dealt with that pressure really well. It really is quite interesting to see how a newly promoted side, of course, you can disregard all of the investment that they had. Of course, that's an anomaly when you look at it in terms of comparison with other promoted teams from before and the past seasons. But it's really interesting how no matter how high they're pressed, Como always tries to keep playing short and on the ground, which is something not even many of the big teams do nowadays. They always try to have the ball. Fabregas's philosophy is really showing in the play style that they have. And their very quick, dominant play style is also really helped by the depth they had coming off the bench. I mean, the first subs that they made were Alberto Moreno, who came on for Alex Valle, who was really struggling. You could see if any Como player here was struggling at all and had a bad day at the office today, it was definitely Valle. He was getting a little bit cooked, even by Vega, to be honest, the right back. So that was interesting to see. But talk about the quality they have coming off the bench. The subs they made were Alberto Moreno, Gabriel Strefezza, Maxence Kakere, Engelhardt came on as well. I mean, this is just an unreal level of depth from a newly promoted team. And of course, as we mentioned, the investment they had into them had a lot to do that. But just a great performance overall. Diao, amazing performance. It's really sad to hear the news that his season is unfortunately going to be over. I think he's having surgery today or tomorrow. So yeah, terrible news, because Como really exploited him and also Ikone, especially on the break, because of the insane pace that they both have. Nico Paz as well. Whenever he picks up the ball, he's so quick at turning very fast and, spotting the right pass or knowing when to make the run. It's an incredibly talented team, and unfortunately, they're probably going to be losing him back to Real Madrid this year. But it's been a really fun year to watch Como. One of the best promoted sides in definitely recent history of the Serie A. And the last little thing to highlight, Goldaniga's goal. It was his first, I think he broke a record possibly of longest distance between two Serie A goals. The last one came many years before, so it was also nice to see him get that. And yeah, just a great performance from Como. Essentially what everybody expected, I would argue. But doing it away from home at Lecce, great result, and they're solidifying themselves into mid-table. So very good first year for Fabregas' team. Next up, we have Monza hosting Napoli. And wow, this was a really interesting match. Conte's team dominating possession, which is not a very Conte team thing to do. They always tend to let the other team play more and hit on the counter. But against Monza, it's hard not to dominate possession, honestly, considering the lack of quality they have and how tough their season has been in general under Nesta. But there were a couple of interesting choices that Conte made, I thought, in this game. The thing that stood out to me was Oliveira starting at left back in a back four, because they played a back four. Sometimes they play a back five, and Oliveira slots into that left center back spot with Spinazzola starting a little bit further out wide. But today they both started, and Spinazzola was playing as essentially a winger. There was a lot of times where he was, especially in the first half, because then afterwards, when Oliveira came off, he dropped a little bit deeper again and Raspadori came on. But Spinazzola was one of the higher up players on the pitch, even sometimes being higher up than Politano, the other winger, which was really interesting to see, to be honest. And of course, I mean, as much as it's an interesting decision to start Spinazzola in a game where you know you're going to have to break down your opponent, because Monza are a really defensive team. They like to play the low block where they make you have to break them down, you know, with creativity, with passing. And it's an interesting decision to play a player who's usually not, you know, an attacker in this sort of game. I thought it was quite an interesting one. Of course, I mean, that decision comes at the expense of the injured David Neres, obviously, but it just shocked me to see when you have players such as Ngonge, Noah Okafor, and of course Raspadori, who came on and played really well, to start Spinazzola, who, don't get me wrong, he's shown attacking threat before. Most will remember because of the Euros, obviously. In 2020, he displayed such great quality at beating his man one-on-one, especially until his injury, that was. But I feel like, having watched Roma in the last couple of seasons as well, he wasn't really showcasing that anymore. Obviously, he's getting on in age as well a little bit. He hasn't taken a huge hit to his pace, but it was still an interesting decision. Spinazzola being 32, so it was just interesting to see. But I thought when Raspadori came on later on, it was an interesting decision to see Oliveira coming off. But I guess at that point, you know, you're late in the match, you still need a goal, so you take off Oliveira, who's quite clearly, I would say, between him and Spinazzola, the better defensive player, to sacrifice some of that defensive solidity to go and chase the winner. It makes a lot of sense. And yeah, when Raspadori came on, honestly, in this last little stretch of games, I'm surprised he wasn't starting, because he's been in such great form. He's creating a lot. Obviously, it's been a couple of games since he's really gotten involved as much, but great performance from him. And it's this kind of depth that Napoli needs if they want to go and chase the league title, which now they can do. Of course, they're not helped by the fact that Inter got knocked out of the cup last night, but you know, they still have the Champions League. They still have a lot of things to worry about. So, and Napoli has a lot easier schedule, I would say. So they can go and chase this title with this depth. Of course, a bit unfortunate with the injuries again, to Buongiorno, especially to Juan Jesus, and also David Neres. But if some of those can come back, they're all projected to come back in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be nice depth for Napoli to go and chase games. And again, McTominay, what hasn't been said about him this season? He's had such an amazing season. He's in talks for arguably being the best new arrival, I would say, or at least one of the most important for sure, because of his goals. Napoli are pushing for the title, so definitely one of the most key arrivals. And to some, it was really unexpected, considering how much kind of slack he got while playing for Manchester United. But of course, nowadays it's a usual thing that when a player leaves Man United, they start performing better. So maybe we should have expected it more. And some people did. Some people gave them credit. So it's good. Nice win for Napoli. A little bit sketchy, to be honest. You ideally wouldn't want to have to wait until the 72nd minute to score a winner against this Monza side. But, they got the win. That's the 3 points. They'll take it, and they can get ready for their next game without having any games in between, which Inter doesn't have the privilege of. So let's see what happens. But next up, we have Roma taking yet another win and extending their unbeaten streak now to 17 games. And this is, just a classic Roma game, I would argue. In the last couple of weeks and months, really, it's always sort of been this. Whenever they play a team that they expect to be beating, they beat them 1-0, and then when they play against a team that's higher up in the league, they draw. That tends to be Roma's results as of recent. But it was still a good win for Roma. I think they have the quality to go and push for more goals. It didn't really look as if they wanted to particularly. They just were happy to play around the back and hold possession, just not give up too many chances, which they didn't. They didn't give up any big chances against Hellas Verona. And yeah, I think it was in the end a good result. They need wins, and especially this was their last arguably easier game that they have. They have a really tough schedule coming up, including games against Inter, I believe Atalanta and Milan and Fiorentina as well afterwards. So they really needed this win because it's one of the only let's say games that they were expected to win. So it was a good win. Mathias Soulé, ever since it's unfortunate Paulo Dybala's injury, of course, but it's opened up this opportunity, for Mathias Soulé to really show his quality, something that he really didn't have at the start of the season, especially after De Rossi got sacked. Juric's system, apart from, being what it is in the first place, which wasn't really effective at all, wasn't effective at Southampton after he joined them either. Mathias Soulé didn't have really any opportunities under him because his system didn't use wingers as in the same way as Ranieri's does. And even though it is still the same tactical shape, let's say, that Juric was deploying, it gives more opportunities for players like Soulé or like Baldanzi or like Pellegrini in some cases to kind of roam and be quite creative with the ball once they get it at their feet. And that's exactly what happened. It was a lovely pass from Cristante out to him, which again is a thing rarely said with Cristante's recent performances as well, not only in a Roma shirt but also in an Italy shirt. But it was a very nice touch from Soulé, dribbles past his man, gets the ball in the middle. It was very shocking how none of the Hellas Verona players managed to get to that ball, but Shomurodov working really hard as per usual, chasing it down and managing to get the tap in. So good goal for Roma. I wish they would go, a little bit more on the offensive after they score goals, but they'll take the win. And Shomurodov, wow, what a really meteoric rise, one would say, and really unexpected considering the situation he was in just at the start of the season. He's been loaned out a couple of times recently by Roma, and it was always in the news that they were looking for a new striker. Even in the January transfer window, they were very close to selling him or sending him out on loan. And it takes really strong mentality to, have to hear that all the time, that there's news about you might be getting transferred away, your team doesn't want you anymore, to put your head down, keep working in the way that Shomurodov has done, and to steal a starting spot from Dovbyk, who's been really underperforming this season for Roma, especially from the expectations that he was set to begin with. Wow, just incredible work by Shomurodov to catch up and to bench Dovbyk in such an important game for Roma. I wonder if they're going to start him in the bigger games as well, or if they'll go back to Dovbyk. Dovbyk also seems like the type of person who would take this benching on the chin and put his head down and keep on working. He hasn't really smiled since arriving at Roma at all, which tells you all you need to know about his mentality. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what Ranieri chooses. They have looked all right when playing with those two up top together, so that could be an idea, especially because Dovbyk is a more traditional center forward. He needs chances to be created for him to finish them. He's a good finisher, of course, but when those chances don't arrive, he doesn't really provide anything else for his team, whereas Shomurodov is a more dynamic striker. He looks for the ball more, he presses a lot higher, he's faster than Dovbyk, and he really creates the chances himself. So it's an interesting balance Roma could have there with playing with two up top. But again, that wouldn't really leave too much space for Sule, so it's arguable. But yeah, regardless of everything, good home win for Roma. They need to lock in now for these next upcoming games. They have a really hard schedule, as we mentioned. So let's see if they can do it and push for the Champions League. The next game we had was Empoli against Venezia, and we touched upon this earlier. Very unfortunate result over here, as both teams miss a huge chance to pick up 3 points against a direct rival and leapfrog Lecce into 17th spot and being out of the relegation zone. But it was a really fun game. It was the game with the most goals scored in this whole game week, which I don't think anybody was expecting, but both teams really showed that they wanted it. I think it was interesting as both teams arguably scored when they were being dominated more. So both teams are counterattacking, which makes sense. They're both, relegation level teams, so they'll always look to hit you on the counterattack. But them doing it to each other and those goals all being so close was really entertaining to see. Even though the quality of said goals might not have been the best. The first half, Venezia dominated. They were definitely unlucky to score, I would argue. And Empoli came out and showed a lot of personality, I would say, to dominate the possession in the second half until really the last, let's say, 15 or so minutes when Venezia took control a bit more. But that's something we haven't seen as much from Empoli in the other fixtures. Of course, they struggled to do it against the bigger teams because of the difference in quality, but it was an interesting change of pace to see Empoli do this, and it gives me more hopes for them to survive, especially given some of the quality they have. That pass that Henderson gave Fazzini for the first goal, wow, that was a great defense splitting pass, which you would expect from Fazzini usually rather than Henderson, but great nevertheless. And Venezia's defensive line got really put under pressure during that period of the game. But then a bad mistake from Vasquez, and it's a relatively rare mistake, I would argue, from Vasquez, who's proven to be a Serie A quality goalkeeper this year, especially with his form at the start of the year. After a solid display that he was having even in this game, arguably, bad mistake off the corner. He comes out, misses the ball, and it just led to a very easy tap in for Venezia to get back into the game. Then again, after a couple of very unfortunate bounces for Vasquez, Venezia even took the lead, which you could argue was not really... they didn't really have the merit to go and take the lead, but they did well. And then Empoli towards the end, really good to get that equalizer, at least take a point. Obviously that's not ideal, you would ideally want all three, but Angelin, a very nice, well-placed shot from outside the box. It shows some of the quality that he has. He hasn't been able to show it much this season, but there's a player there. There's really a player there, and it shows you why he was in Chelsea's academy in the first place. I wish he would get more opportunity than he does right now. But we'll see. He's a high potential player. He's still young. I think there's a player there, but we'll see what can happen. And we'll see if he stays at Empoli more than anything. But the next game, wow, this was a big one. Bologna versus Inter. What a game. What an end to the game, if anything. And Inter, it's a couple of really bad back-to-back losses here for them. They took this loss. They drew to Parma a couple of games ago. They lost to Milan now, 3-0 in the cup semi-final. And this Inter team looks almost unrecognizable from the beginning of the season. It might have been now because they're missing Thuram, and of course, they were missing Gianmarco, who's still being rested a bunch. They're still missing Dumfries, who's still out injured. But I don't think with a team that has as much quality as Inter does, you can't hide behind that excuse. Of course, the team is tired. They play a lot of games. They play midweek a lot. They have Champions League. They had the cup up until last night. But the team has to put a better performance. And especially when you're going to chase a league title, you just cannot lose a game like this. Of course, it was away. And Bologna is one of the most informed teams in the Serie A. But it's a tough loss to take. It just is. But in this game, Bologna's pressing was really preventing Inter's build-up. And the two centre-backs of Bologna, Lukumi and Bukema, did a great job at man-marking Lautaro and especially Correa, who really did not have an impact. It's tough for him, of course, because with the Thuram injury and Arnautovic only coming in towards the later end of the game, it's not the first time he gets an opportunity this season, but his opportunities are rare. And when you're getting them that rarely in a team this good, you need to perform if you want to stick around. And he just really didn't, getting completely pocketed, I would argue, by Lukumi. So yeah, a great performance by Bologna. Dalinga's hold-up play, I thought, was really good. He was always dropping deeper to link up with the midfielders and also the defenders, because both of Bologna's wingbacks push up really high and become essentially the wingers, with Miranda staying really out wide and Holm doing so as well, while Ndoi and Dominguez, who began the game, Orsolini was benched for whatever reason, they began the game more inside. Dalinga was dropping deeper, and also Odegaard was pushing up, and it was really good link-up play to see. And it's really a staple of a Vincenzo Italiano team, I would argue. Fiorentina was really playing well like this in his seasons with them. And yeah, it shows that he's one of the better coaches in the league right now. He's definitely the most informed right now, and really is starting to be wanted. His name is starting to be linked to big teams like Roma and Milan. But one would argue, when the situation is this good at Bologna, and he's very likely to get Champions League this season, or at least Europe, in a season where many expected Bologna to drop off due to having gotten into Europe for the first time in many years, it's a really impressive performance. And it's going to be interesting to see if anyone goes after him for real. Milan, of course, being one of the big candidates to look for him, and Roma as well. So it's going to be interesting. It was also a very entertaining and high-paced battle, especially in the midfield. It was very physical, very technical, between Freuler, Ebischer, Barella, Mkhitaryan, and also even Çalhanoğlu was getting involved a little bit. I was expecting to see him get taken off, but he played the whole 90 minutes. It was a very just entertaining game. It wasn't the most, there weren't many chances created, but from point of view of tactics and pressing and game play styles, let's say, it was very entertaining to watch. And Bologna definitely deserved the win, I would say, especially in those last 5 to 10 minutes. They were really pressing Inter. Inter was really just holding out for the point in those final few minutes, and they got punished for doing so. And it's not the first time Bologna does this. They did it against Napoli, where they went and chased the goal that drew the game with Ndoi. And for the entire second half of that game against Napoli, Bologna were pressing. And Napoli, of course, who, as we mentioned earlier, are happy to give up the ball, almost didn't have it at all in that game. Bologna just had 61% possession in that game. It was just really, really good to see from Vincenzo Italiano's team. And there's not much analysis to be done on that final goal, but what a strike from Orsolini. Great coordination to get there. Just, wow. What a team. What a team. I really hope to see them in Europe next season. I think it was very, cold feet like performance for them in the Champions League this season. They were also getting used to having a new manager, a slightly different system to what Thiago Motta had with new players. Of course, they sold Xerxes, they sold Calafiori last season. And with the Champions League group stage games being at the start of the season, they didn't really manage to perform. But I'm really interested to see if this team keeps Italiano and a lot of their star players, how they can perform in Europe next season. Whether they get Champions League or not is going to be interesting to see, but I really want to see them play in Europe. So we'll see what happens. But next up, we had Milan against Atalanta. This was a game where I was having so much fun looking at the tactics evolve. It was, although like many of the other games, especially for the big teams, it was only a 1-goal winner. It was such an interesting game from a tactics point of view, especially because it was only the second game where Milan had played this new formation. Conceição reverting back to this 3 at the back that he played, 5 at the back for the most part, that he played with Porto, and that he was so successful with getting really that team to overachieve considering the quality they had. They took Arsenal to penalties last season in the Champions League, and yeah, it's clearly a system that he knows well, and I commend him for waiting a little bit before implementing it. And my guess would be that they must have been trying it in training a lot before, showing it and playing it for real in real games. And that's a really commendable thing from Conceição, to not come in and straight away, like many managers do, especially considering the fact that he was coming in halfway through the season. Completely shifting the formation and everything can sometimes be destructive. For example, how Juric did so for Roma. So yeah, it was a really good attempt from Milan, I would say. I'm giving them a lot of praise despite the fact that they lost this, but we've seen this system work really well against Udinese, first of all, where they won 4-0, and where they beat Inter 3-0. Whether that was because of their tiredness or anything, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, they got the result with the system, and they didn't play badly, I would argue, against Atalanta. Yes, they didn't create many amazing chances, and yes, Atalanta had the upper hand for most of the game, and they were in control of it for more, and they created better chances for sure. But I don't think Milan played well, and I don't think that Milan played badly. But this system really brings out the quality Theo Hernandez especially has, and the quality that Fofana and Reindeers both have as well. They really suit this system well, because Theo, of course, he's a more attacking fullback. He's never really been a fullback. He's always been more of a wingback for Milan. Even in Pioli's systems, you would see him attacking way more. And this system gives him a lot more freedom, as Leao cuts a little bit further inside sometimes. Theo can go for the overlaps, and he can really be dangerous, as was seen in the game against Udinese, where he scored the goal. And same can be said about the other side with him, and as his role is, Milan still has to figure that out, definitely, because he's shown the capability of being able to play on the wing. He's shown being able to play as a right back, but I think his talents lie more with the offensive side of the ball. So this system really works for him. And Fofana and Rangers that I brought up in the middle of the pitch, both of them hardworking players, really good at roaming, especially Rangers. He's really good at passing and then moving. So he does a lot of those 1-2s with Theo, with Jovic he did. And it was not the best performance this game in particular by Rangers. But when you're going up against this talented of an Atalanta team, it's obviously hard to make your mark. And in only the second game that they were trying this new system out. But one player that I don't see this system benefiting too much is Pulisic. He really seemed to struggle with having to cut in and having to stay in such more tight spaces. It might be obviously to do with the fact that on his side is Ederson, who was breaking up the play. But he's really seeming to be struggling now. So let's see if he can adapt better to the system. But Atalanta, otherwise, very good performance. As we mentioned, they were in control of the game for the majority of it. They played really well, especially considering a very interesting tactical decision here from Gasperini, that at the start of the game, and really until the 60th or so minute when Cuadrado eventually comes off, Bellanova was playing as the right center back in this system. And of course, Gasperini in Gasperini's system, he looks for Derun to come deeper and get the ball from the defenders to link to the attack. But with the two center backs overlapping a lot of the time, but Bellanova was really doing this really, really well. And the thing was, Cuadrado was playing as a right wing back in this game, which is the position Bellanova usually plays. But having Cuadrado there, occupying the space in front of him, was really leaving Bellanova very open, because Theo and Pavlovic as well were really occupied with having to mark Cuadrado and Pasalic. So it was giving Bellanova a lot of space deep to kind of collect the ball and have time to really place his crosses into the middle. And Retegui didn't connect as much in this game, but it's an interesting tactical development for Atalanta. It's going to be really interesting to see if they continue with it, especially because they were benching a few very good center backs in order to do this. Kusunu, of course, he hasn't made as much of an impact as he would have liked to in this Atalanta team. And obviously with having Scalvini and Kolasinac out and also Posh being out, it restricted the choice of who to play at that right center back, especially because you need a little bit more pace and Toloi is not adapt to really play on that side. But it was a really interesting thing, and Bellanova ends up getting the assist in this game. Of course, it was from a wonderful counterattack. Ederson, what an amazing player. He links the defense with the midfield and then with the attack, scoring that goal as well himself. He's the real definition of a true playmaker, but also box-to-box midfielder. What a performance from him. That's the reason you hear him linked to so many big teams. And wow, really going under the radar here. And for Atalanta to win this game, even when Retegui's not performing, Pasalic is not having his best game, and Lookman, he was still able to, win his one-on-ones, but not as decisively as he usually does. Great result for them, especially away from home. Of course, now they seem it's too little too late for them. They've regained their form, but they did it a little too late to be still in the title race. They're 7 points behind, so it doesn't look like they'll be able to catch up with Inter or Napoli, but it's a good sign, and it's a good last hurrah sort of to clinch eventually, hopefully, for them, Champions League qualification for Gasperini. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can finish it off. They also have some hard games later on in the season, so we'll see what happens. But now we come to the last 4 games that were obviously delayed and played a little bit later because of the Pope's death. So obviously here we extend our condolences to anyone affected by it. And yeah, it was a real shame. Of course, it was really nice to see that everybody all of these games held a minute of silence for the passing. And yeah, just it really affected Italy. You could really see how much people cared. There was a lot of people in the stands really getting emotional about it. So it was a really nice gesture to move the games ahead, and as well as some games for next game week, which have been moved ahead because of the funerals happening on Saturday. So yeah, really nice gesture, really well executed, I would say, for Serie A. They're not known for their organizational skills usually, but they did really well this time around. So it was nice to see. But getting into the action, Cagliari hosted Fiorentina and they ended up losing this one 2-1. Really, really big win for Fiorentina, who kind of struggled in this game, I would say. Straight away, they, give up that goal. It was a bit of a rare mistake from De Gea, who essentially punches out across straight to Piccoli, who I have to say had really great composure, because once the ball arrives to him, he still had a lot to do in that play. So he did really well with that. Good composure to finish it off. And yeah, he still had a lot of players in his way, so he did truly well. But Fiorentina falling behind so early, away from home, it really looked, and after the goal, they were still under a bit of pressure for the next 10 or so minutes. So it was really strange to see them struggling so much. But after a bit, they got themselves into the game. They regained kind of control of it. Gosens scores with a really nice, well-placed finish, I have to say, from Gosens. And although right before the end of the first half, there was a very contentious penalty decision that could have been given to Cagliari. In the end, it was I think the referee made the wrong decision, is all I'll say. The tackle was very close. The argument was that he didn't touch him as much and that Luvumbo kind of exaggerated the contact, but it was contentious. And especially because of how that would have affected the game. Cagliari would have, if they had scored the penalty, taken the lead going into the break, which is obviously never a great time to concede. And yeah, it would have been a different game for sure. And then obviously the opposite ends up happening right after halftime. Beltran scores his header. Great cross from Dodo, I have to say. But that sort of ended the game. Cagliari was then under a bunch of pressure for the next couple of minutes. And then even though they did regain and get some more composure and control of the game, they never really looked like they were going to score. They only put up 0.29 XG in this game. They never made a big chance. So yeah, afterwards, Fiorentina started dominating. And I have to say, really big props to both Gosens, who did well out on the left, but more importantly to Dodo, who did really well. He played a great match. He had a really great work ethic the entire time, running up and down, defending and closing down his opponents when they have the ball, when he has the ball, running forward, getting those crosses into the box. This season has been a really nice story to see him come back, because last season he had that big injury. Kayode was playing all of those minutes, and even though it is sad to see another Italian team lose a young talent in Kayode, a homegrown talent for Fiorentina, to the Premier League, it's really benefited Dodo this season, who is playing really well, getting loads of assists. So yeah, really good performance and really a stalwart for Fiorentina. They'll need him to keep performing if they want to beat Real Betis in the Conference League semi-finals. But great game. And also, Fiorentina doing this without Moise Kean, who was a really last-minute kind of decision that he was taking time off for personal reasons. I think it's been kind of reported. He also did have a contusion with his ankle. So it was interesting to see. Maybe it might have been a mix of the two, but it was reported that the time off that he took was supposedly to do with something related to the Pope's passing. So condolences to his family and anyone that might have been affected. But yeah, a great win for Fiorentina considering they didn't have their star man. And yeah, gets them a little bit closer to that hopeful European qualification for them. So let's see what happens. And yeah, the next game was Genoa against Lazio, and talk about an entertaining game, which I never really expected this one to be so entertaining as it was. Lazio putting a lot of shots, creating a lot of chances, 2 red cards. And wow, it was really, really sad to see that early red card for the club debutant Otoa. He was making his club debut with Genoa, and Vieira took a long time integrating him after he was signed. And to start off your career for a new team in that way is never nice to see. So hopefully he can bounce back. Hopefully Vieira still holds trust with him in the future, because there must have been a reason they signed him. He must have something to offer. So hopefully we get to see him again. But realistically, there wasn't any really stopping Lazio's dominance until they cooled off for maybe the last 15 minutes after Belayan also got a red card. But it never really looked like Genoa was going to be able to do anything too much. It was a very interesting decision, I thought, from Baroni to leave all that attacking talent on the bench, like Noslin and Dele Bashiru. He left a lot of people on the bench in favor of Maurizic, who started on the right wing. And he was sort of alternating, let's say, with Lazzari, especially when Genoa got the red card. Lazzari was looking to overlap a bunch. That's a staple. The attacking fullbacks are a staple of Lazio's system, regardless under Baroni. But when Lazzari went off injured at halftime, Maurizic then got moved right back to his right back role, and Pedro came on. He didn't have a great game. Honestly, he created some chances, but he was never really looking like scoring. But yeah, an incredible goal. The first one, especially from Castellanos, while he was perhaps not being marked as tightly as he could have been. But what can you do when you have a red card? It's really hard to distribute, especially defensive responsibilities. But it was a frankly outstanding finish on the volley. Incredible coordination to get himself there. And it's nice to see from him, especially considering the last season he struggled a lot. A lot of Lazio fans were turning on him. So it was nice to see that he's kind of picking back up his form and asserting himself as one of the league's best strikers. And for the second goal, it was a really good pass as well from Rovella. And also very good hustle from Dia, who kind of defends the ball with his body really well, while also having to run really quickly to pick up the pass. And then the composure to finish the chance as well. Really great. And another really good performance as well from Luca Pellegrini, who's hitting a great patch of form right now. He had an assist against Roma as well. And he gets the assist here for Tati Castellanos' goal. And now he's really helping out Lazio. This is the best case scenario for them after Tavares' injury. Of course, Tavares being the best creator for them. It's the best case scenario for them considering Tavares' injury, and they'll be happy to see Pellegrini performing regardless. Provides a really good rotational option for them, which they very much lack in defense otherwise. So yeah, good performance from him as well. But now we're coming to perhaps the biggest upset of this game week. Parma beating Juventus 1-0. And this really puts kind of a stick between Juve's tires, and it's really going to hamper their push for Champions League here. They are now a point behind Bologna, who won their game, of course, against Inter unexpectedly. And Lazio are now tied on points with Juve. Roma's only 2 points behind. Fiorentina's 3 points behind. It's really going to be a tight race, if not even for the Champions League. even for these Europa League spots, especially considering Milan isn't going to be in the final of the cup, if they win it, the Europa League spot drops to them, which is 9th place, which would mean only fifth place in the league ends up being a Europa League spot, while 6th would end up being a Conference League spot, which could really undo a bit of Juve's hard work that they've done with Juric. Especially because if Roma and Lazio or Fiorentina can overtake them and Milan win that, they wouldn't get Europe at all. And after a season of spending so much money, spending so many resources and time waiting for Thiago Motta to instill his system, it's a hard loss to take, really. It was definitely their worst performance under Igor Tudor in these last 4 games. They were completely in control of the game, sure, but absolutely unable to come up with anything offensively. They created no big chances in the entire 90 minutes. They only put 2 of their 16 shots on target. It was just bad from them. They really weren't unable to assert themselves and take real control in terms of creating chances and scaring Parma as much, despite having 16 shots, which tells you something. Also, Vlahovic came off at halftime, which must be frustrating, especially after he had a couple of very good games before, putting many assists on the plate for his teammates. It must be tough to take. It really must be. And yeah, it was an incredible header, frankly, by Pellegrino. He had a lot of work to do getting to that header, but a great delivery from Valeri, who, it has to be said, has really become a much better crosser this season. He's really upping his deliveries and getting a lot of assists in turn. So really good development from Valeri in Parma. But of course, the goal was against the run of play, you can say that. But when Parma can execute this sort of game plan like they try to do against every big team, it finally coming off against Inter first and now against Juve, they won't care one bit whether it was against the run of play or not. They'll take the points, especially because this puts them in a good position to not have to worry as much about relegation. Now they're 6 points away from it, and they're unbeaten in their last 5 games, which for Parma is a really great result. They're 6 points away, as we said, from relegation. Really, really good result. Obviously, they were helped by Venezia and Empoli's draws, Cagliari's and Lecce's losses. But yeah, the fact that they can get themselves a little bit further away really helps them out. And I think Parma is one of those teams that, despite being there statistically and mathematically, they don't feel, if you watch them, like a team that deserves to go down. Yes, they've conceded a lot of goals. Yes, sometimes when they play the big teams, they get spanked a little bit. But they never really feel, considering the quality they have, like a team that should go down. Especially when you consider players like Bernabé, players like Som, Bonni, even Dennis Mann. Yeah, it feels like a team that should stay up. Even Mihaila, somewhere in there. So yeah, I hope they can stay up. On another great note for Parma, their young centre-back Giovanni Leoni, who's been picking up starts pretty much since the beginning of the new year, he dropped an absolute masterclass against Juve. And to think that he's only 18 years old, and listen to this, he won 6 out of 7 of his duels. He made 7 clearances. He had 2 blocks, and he also showcased some good passing, getting 2 passes into the final third from center back. And the fact that he showed this a lot for Sampdoria last season in Serie B, but now to be doing it against Juventus, no matter what state Juventus are currently in, you're still playing Juventus. You're still expected as Parma to lose this game. It's truly impressive for an 18-year-old. I hope this continues from him. I hope Christian Kivu gives him this continuity and allows him to keep showing what he can do. So we'll see what happens with him. But I really hope that he keeps this up. But yeah, lastly, where to start with Juve? I gave them a little bit of flack at the start of the of this little segment on them. But truly, other than Conceição, who looked good when he came on, I would say. He was making some chances. He was kind of like, his performance was quite comparable to Tete Morente for Lecce this week. He was really having a lot of chances, but only really creating for himself and always trying to shoot, which, it's excusable in a game, especially where it's frustrating. You're not having a lot of shots. The other team is playing a low block. But yeah, other than his performance and Kaluru's, who played pretty well, linked up the play well, brought the team up the field a couple of times, carrying the ball, there weren't really any standout performances whatsoever. McKennie was really struggling in this game. It baffles me that Tudor didn't start Weah, especially considering he showed you a lot in that game against Roma. He put in the cross that led to eventually Locatelli's goal. I don't know, he just looked more dangerous. McKennie looked a little bit out of his depth in this game, and to say that against Parma is really saying something. Especially considering, I'm not giving all the fault to McKennie here, but he really didn't play well, lost a lot of balls. It's not really his position. Let's be real. It's been said before. I think even Andrea Pirlo said this in a conference. He's more of an 8, realistically. That's where he's played the most of his career. He's way more comfortable playing in the middle. Right wing back, I don't really see it being his position. I know that Allegri deployed him there a lot in the last couple of seasons, but I don't know. I just feel like Weah is better suited to that sort of system. Or, someone like Conceição. They just need another Cambiaso on that wing, and it's tough obviously with a lot of the injuries that they have, but yeah, it just wasn't great. And lastly, I don't understand why Tudor waited until the 86th minute to bring in more subs, because of course he brought Conceição and Kenan Yildiz on earlier. But when you're chasing a goal, when you see your team struggling so much to create offensive opportunities against a Parma side who are, as we said, in the relegation battle realistically, you have to make more changes earlier. And of course, I understand they don't have much depth right now because of the injuries they have, but at least somebody like Timothy Weah, I understand that maybe Alberto Costa, who came on, and Douglas Luiz, you don't trust them as much to get you over that hump, but at least somebody like Weah, put him on earlier, because realistically, what is he going to do for the last 5 minutes of the game? This really puts, as we said, it really puts a stick in the wheel of Juve's Champions League push. They've now dropped to 5th. It's going to be a really tight fought battle towards the end of the season between 4th place and 8th, who are only separated by 4 points now. It's really going to be interesting to see. This last game, Torino versus Udinese, ends up being 2-0. It's one of the least meaningful games of this game week, I would say. Both teams are relatively stable in this mid-table. Torino getting their usual 10th placed finish or so, while Udinese are sitting in 11th. They're neither at danger of challenging any of the European contenders or at danger of dropping. So it wasn't a game that many people chose to watch on this last slate that happened yesterday. But it was a good first half for Torino. They had a lot of good chances, even though it was from a lucky bounce. It was nice to see Che Adams find the net again. After some of his recent struggles, him finding form again is going to be crucial to their last end of season push. And it was a bad mistake by Solé on Dembele's goal, who he just didn't really manage to clear the ball properly. And it shows that this guy has flaws too. He's not the perfect defender. He had a really great start and a really big impact at Udinese at the start, but he's human as well. He's also capable of making mistakes, let's say, and it's shown in the last couple of games, especially in the game against Milan. But overall, he has been in amazing form. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bigger team snap him up in the next part of the season, because he really suits Serie A well. He's a big physical defender who will win his aerial duels, and he'll really challenge as well for goals off of corners, or even from goals off of long shots, as we saw against Inter. Quite a good player. Let's see if he can kind of get back his form for the last couple of games of the season. But don't be surprised if a big team snaps him up this transfer window in the summer. But again, it was another great performance for Milinkovic-Savic as well, who in goal made 6 saves and faced a 1.6 expected goals from shots on target, which was really a lot. I was surprised to see that stat, because when watching the game, it didn't seem as though Udinese was having as many chances as they were, but they were. They had one big chance, they had 10 shots, and they forced Milinkovic-Savic to make 6 saves, which is a lot, all things considered. And yeah, they also had a small bright spot, I would argue, in Arthur Atta, who, although he struggles to get goal contributions, it has to be said, he always seems to be moving in the right areas and making himself a little bit dangerous. He obviously scored that goal that was offside. Whether they keep him from his loan, I think he's being loaned from Metz, if I'm not mistaken. That's another question, whether they can keep him or not. But it's going to be, yeah, he's showing something, at least. He's showing something. And especially in games where Udinese, they were on the back foot from the beginning, because Tovan, who's their lead creator, and Luca, who's their lead scorer, were both out. They knew they were going to be struggling to create chances and score goals. It was a nice little spark to see, at least. So that's a little positive that Udinese can draw for the end of the season. But that wraps up the Matchday 33 game week recap. We're done with that. And now we'll be moving on to the next section of the podcast, which, as I explained in the introduction, is gonna be the weekly topic. And this week's weekly topic is every team's X factor for the final stretch of the season. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Let's take a look at some X factors. So these are going to be things that each team either needs to continue doing, or things that the team needs to start doing in order to have a better push and ending to the season. So we've picked one out for each team, and we've organized the teams in alphabetical order. So we're obviously going to start with Atalanta. The X factor we've picked out for them is reigniting the attack or unlocking the third attacker. So in general, it's been pretty clear that Atalanta's current problem has to do with their goal scoring. They've only scored 3 goals in their last 5 games, and even though it has to be said and mentioned that these last 5 games for Atalanta have been insanely difficult, they've had a schedule consisting of Inter, Fiorentina, Lazio, Bologna, and Milan all back-to-back. It is a little bit concerning for Atalanta to not be scoring goals, because that's essentially what they're known for. That's what they've always been very good at doing under Gasperini. They're consistently one of the top 3 teams, at least in Serie A, for goals scored. And it's kind of like they're losing their identity almost. This season especially, the bigger problem has been the second attacking midfielder spot, which has been essentially contested between De Ketelaere and Pasalic, who this season in Serie A have only combined to score 8 goals in total. And considering how good last season was for De Ketelaere, who really made Milan regret the decision to add that buyout clause in his loan deal for Atalanta, it's really concerning how badly he dropped off. And if we're being honest, Atalanta hasn't looked really the same ever since January, essentially. But now it's becoming a bigger concern. They were looking to address their defense at the beginning of January. They didn't even really manage to do that. They brought on Posh, who realistically was only ever playing right back for Bologna. He doesn't really fit Gasperini's system whatsoever. And they should have bought maybe more attackers. They managed to bring in Maldini, who hasn't also had an impact whatsoever. They gave away Zaniolo, who went to Fiorentina. It's just not really been clicking for the third attacker. It's always really been Retegui and Lookman causing most of the damage up there. And now, even that Lookman is in bad form, that's when this issue gets highlighted even more, because there's almost no production coming from that third spot. So that's something they really have to address. The numbers from earlier in the season were completely supercharged, but just finding some offensive consistency, let's say, would help them securing that UCL spot, which they already essentially almost have, especially looking at their end of season schedule. They still have to play Lecce, Monza, Genoa and Parma, who are all easier games that they should be able to take care of, but the goal scoring is a little bit concerning, let's say. Next up, we're looking at Bologna, and the X factor for them is getting the most out of Orsolini in this final stretch of games. He's already having his best goal scoring season in Serie A, having racked up 12 goals, which is hard to believe that it's his best goal scoring season. I feel like it hasn't really felt that way for Orsolini on a personal level, but it is, and he's been performing really well, even coming off the bench a lot of times. Everyone's really well aware of Italiano's funky rotations, to say the least. He did a lot of those with Fiorentina as well last season and in the season before, especially considering that they went deep into the Conference League every time. And Orsolini has been suffering in terms of minutes played when it comes to that. And yeah, he's still managing to score more. So maybe having him come off the bench fresh is something that's actually helpful. And he's shown that he can score goals off the bench just this week against Inter. But if he keeps this momentum up, whenever he scores or assists, Bologna wins. It's statistically, this season they haven't lost a single game, and as a matter of fact, the last game that he got a contribution in, so a goal or an assist, that they did lose was in January 14th 2024, which is a year and a half ago at this point, which is really insane to think of, isn't it? He's just been so consistent, especially considering how many contributions he gets and how many contributions he gets in different games as well. It's, yeah, whenever he does so, Bologna doesn't lose. So they have to keep him going. He's on a hot streak of scoring goals this season. And most importantly, he's one of the biggest leaders in that Bologna team. He started the season captaining them. Obviously, that's been taken off. And the Bologna captaincy has been a very, let's say, debated issue this year. It's gone to a couple of different players, but you know, it's still well known that he's a very big leader in that team. And yeah, if he keeps firing, Bologna's gonna keep winning games, so they have to keep that up, whether it's off the bench or as a starter. Next up, we have Cagliari, who really need to make the Unipol Domus a fortress. When they're playing at home, they've only lost 3 of their last 7 home games, which on paper sounds bad, but considering that they're one of the favorite candidates for relegation every season, and considering how narrowly they escaped relegation last year, it is pretty good home form going for them. And especially when you consider that those defeats came against Fiorentina this week, and then the other 2 were against Lazio and Juve, which are both games that Cagliari is never really expected to win. They're never going to be favorites in any of those games. So all things considered, they've been doing pretty well at home. They managed to always squeak out results over there, it seems. And their last 2 home games of the season are really crucial, because the first one is against Udinese, who realistically don't have much to play for because they're already safe. they're never gonna challenge the European spots, as we mentioned earlier. They're never gonna go down this year. Mathematically, it's almost impossible. So Udinese don't have much to play for. And the other game that they have that's playing at home is against Venezia, a fellow relegation candidate who, if they could avoid defeat or even beat Venezia in that game, that would possibly mean automatically relegating them and saving themselves. That's going to be a real relegation 6-pointer. So Cagliari has to win that, and they have to keep up this good form that they've had in this last stretch of the season. Next, we have Como, whose biggest X factor for this last stretch is Jean Boutez's form. I touched upon this earlier when we were talking about Como's match that they won against Lecce this week. Boutez made some really good saves in that, but the key has been the switch away from Pepe Reina and Emi Laudero to Jean Boutez, which has really helped Como solidify that back line, which, let's be honest, they don't have many defenders that teams are too afraid of. Goldaniga is a good defender, but at the end of the day, Como, especially considering their style of play being more expansive and attacking, they're going to concede goals. And especially they're going to concede many shots. But Jean Boutez has been a real revelation for them. Como has the worst expected goals allowed to goals allowed ratio in the league, allowing 48 goals from an expected goals allowed of 36. That's a minus 12 goal swing. And the vast majority of that came when Pepe Reina and Emi Laudero were playing, because Boutez has made a massive difference, only allowing 18 goals from an expected goals on target of 17.58, which, considering it's only a 0.4 or so swing, and that's expected goals on target, that's really much better goalkeeping when you consider the minus 12 difference between goals allowed and the actual expected goals allowed, which pretty much only came as a result of Reina and Laudero. So especially in the most recent games, especially the game against Monza and also the game against Lecce this weekend, as I mentioned earlier, he's made a lot of saves. The only really bad game that he's had recently was the game against Milan, but you can't really fault him too much for that one. And yeah, he's made a massive difference. He's really come out of nowhere, you have to say, because they signed him in January from the Belgian league, and he was not really well known whatsoever. Comes in, steals the starting spot from two, frankly, legendary keepers in the Italian game, because these guys both have racked up, Laudero and Reina, both have racked up so many appearances, so many clean sheets and saves. But nowadays, age just might not be on their side. And Boutez is in form. So if he keeps it going, Como can really make a big push to leap over some of the teams above them and finish in a more solidified mid-table spot, which, again, as a newly promoted team, would be incredible. Next up, we have Empoli, and their X factor is picking up points at home. They have the second worst home record in the league this season, picking up only one win at home in 16 matches. You heard me correct, one win in 16 matches at home. It just makes me feel sorry for their home fans that go to every game. Imagine being a season ticket holder and only being able to see your team win one time out of 16. Luckily, they did draw 7 of those, so it's not as many losses as you would have maybe thought. And considering 2 of those home draws were frustratingly coming against Venezia and Cagliari earlier last month, who are also fighting relegation, it's something they really have to work on and improve, because at home, you always kind of have to win more points than away from home. And it's just a rule that especially teams that are bound for relegation have to try and pick up a certain amount of points at home, and definitely more than away. So the fact that they've not been able to do this year is a very big reason as to why they're down there in the relegation scrap. And with big home games coming up against Lazio, Parma, and very importantly Hellas Verona, they need to squeeze all the points they can out of it to try and stay up, especially in that direct 6-pointer against Hellas Verona. That's going to be a crucial game for them, and hopefully their attackers as well can get into some better form just in time for that game. Next up, Fiorentina. And Fiorentina being one of the only two teams left in the Serie A who still has European football to be played, they have to manage their Conference League fatigue better. In the 3 Serie A games that they've played this season, that were sandwiched between 2 Conference League games, Fiorentina have only picked up 1 point. That means out of 3 games, they lost 2 and they drew 1, which really shows the impact that even a competition like the Conference League, which, let's be honest, this season there's been a lot of critique happening of the Conference League, because seeing as the format shifted in every European competition, because teams that used to be third placed in the Europa League groups used to come into the Conference League, the competition used to have better teams coming into it and going deeper into it. And this season, that hasn't happened. And the quality of opponents, you have to say, really has dropped off. In the round of 16, even as early as that, there were not many top 5 league teams. I think it was only Real Betis, Fiorentina, and Chelsea in there. You really have to feel that Fiorentina has to do better in these Conference League games, especially against this weaker opposition that they had in the last couple of seasons that they reached the final. Because otherwise their Serie A performance will drop off. And as we can see this season by the current look of the table, because of this Serie A form drop off, they're at risk of really not getting any European place this year, which would really hurt them as a team. Moise Kean is probably going to want to leave, especially after the season he's having. They have some other players that are on loan that are probably not going to stick around. This could really hurt them. So it's either they go ahead and win the Conference League, or they just have to rotate better, manage their fatigue better. The drop in performance when they're tired shows, as even in the Conference League, they're not picking up good results. They just drew against NK Celje at home. Excuse me for my pronunciation, but these guys are 4th in the Slovenian league. And I mean, without meaning to judge the book by its cover, if you're 4th in the Slovenian league picking up points against points, I mean, of course it's a 2-legged tie, so it's not points, but drawing against them, it's not a good look. It's not a good look, especially considering they didn't rotate all that much, and the players they were playing in that game are still very capable Serie A players. So yeah, it's not ideal. And with a really important game against Roma coming up, who they're fighting for the European spots with, being squeezed between the 2 semi-final legs against Real Betis. So the Roma game is in between the 2 Real Betis games, while Roma is obviously out of European competition. Fiorentina has to manage their squad better, and if they don't, they could miss out on European competition as a whole. So they have to figure that one out. For Genova, we have finding a consistent source of goals. This season, under Vieira, Genoa has had an incredible defensive performance, especially exactly from their defensive point of view. They've only conceded 40 goals, which is 3 goals less than Lazio, if just for reference. And they have heavily struggled at goal scoring, having the 5th worst goal scoring record in the league, only behind the prime relegation candidates in Lecce, Venezia, Empoli, and Monza. And it really shows in their goal scorers. If you go and look who has scored the most goals for them, after Pinamonti, who's on 8 goals, he's clearly been the best in terms of finishing chances for them. Their other top goal scorers are Miretti, who's a center mid, and De Winter, who's a center back, who are both tied on 3. So Pinamonti's on 8, and those two are tied on 3. it's really concerning how little goal scoring they have from elsewhere, especially considering it's not like they have the worst talent in the world when it comes to attackers. They still have the likes of Vitinha, they still have the likes of Maxwell Cornet. So, and for a period they had Mario Balotelli, who's obviously been out injured for the rest of the time. It's not like they have the worst attackers in the league. I would say there's a couple of teams at least that have had that have worse attacking talent up there. It's just getting the ball to them and getting good goal scoring opportunities. They've really struggled with this season. And on top of that, they have an insanely difficult end stretch made up of Como, Milan, Napoli, Atalanta, and Bologna, who are all games that, if you look at it on paper, Genoa is expected to lose. So it could be a deal of just having to settle for mid-table mediocrity this year. They are 14 points clear of relegation, so they're not going to go down, that's for sure. But yeah, they're going to struggle definitely climbing up above Como or Udinese for the likes due to this goal-scoring form, unless they somehow turn it around. Okay, maybe they get Mario back to his Euro 2012 days, scoring braces against Germany and everything. Next up, we have Hellas Verona, and their X factor for finishing this season well is extending their defensive form. Earlier this season, Hellas had a terrible defensive record. It was really bad. I don't know if you remember, but as they were trying to play more exciting football, they really leaked a lot of goals at the back. This was leaving them very open, which is why they currently have the worst defensive record in the league, allowing 60 goals in 33 games. That is the worst defense in the league. Even worse than Monza, somehow, by 3 goals. And yet they sit in 14th place. This is because they've decided to bunker down recently and play a more counter-attacking football, looking to exploit their faster attackers and their wing-backs. They have a lot of pace on the wings and in the 2 strikers that they play. For example, in their last game against Roma, they tried to exploit this as well, going on the counter with Mosquera, with Sarr, Chachua is on the wing, Bradaric is on the other wing. So they have a lot of pace, and when they get the ball forward, they can run at you and put you in trouble, even if you're a big team. And this has really worked. This has led to a defensive transformation where they've only conceded twice in their last 5 games. And keep in mind, not all of these last 5 games have been pieces of cake, especially for a team of Hellas's, caliber. They've played against Udinese, Parma, Torino, Genoa, and Roma, who they only conceded 1 goal to. Granted, most teams only do concede 1 goal to Roma. But, teams like Udinese and Torino and Genoa, these are all mid-table teams that they're managing to stop from scoring too many goals against them. So it's been quite a transformation, I have to say. A lot of that has been due to Valentini, who's been in really good form, and Ghilardi, who's been a great new discovery for them at the back. But a lot of credit, I would say, has to go to Zanetti's change of style that they've had in the second half of the season. So if they can continue extending this defensive form to their last games of the season, they're going to really be able to survive as long as they keep up this defensive solidity. Next up for Inter, we've already touched upon this while talking about them earlier and also while talking about Fiorentina just now. It's rotating the squad and managing the fatigue. Realistically, this is the only really big problem that Inter have had this season. It's been managing the squad and especially the substitutions. The substitutions have been a really big talking point amongst Inter fans for a lot of this season, as many of their key players tend to leave Serie A games early in order to be well rested for the Champions League games. But when some of the players that are involved in this are Bastoni, who's the key to their defensive identity, it leaves you wondering whether the Serie A should be prioritized a little bit more, especially considering that now Napoli have caught up to them. They're tied on points, and Inter have the it's not really arguable the much harder schedule between those teams. And yeah, especially in these last 10 minutes of the game against Bologna, you could really see how tired that Inter team was. Bologna was really, and at the same time, this is a characteristic that Bologna has in general. They do this to a lot of teams where they put pressure on them really late, because when they make substitutions, those guys always come on with a lot of energy. Guys like Cambiaghi, who come on very late, or Dominguez, who usually does. They bring a lot of energy, and Bologna is an energetic team regardless. But at the same time, you could really see how tired Inter was, because they let that happen to them. Usually when teams try to press them higher, Inter will just play around them or look for one of their fullbacks running wider. This time it was really different, and Bologna didn't let them have the ball at the end of the game. And having said this, with important games against Roma and Lazio coming up before and after the tie against Barcelona, who also at the same time plays a very extremely high tempo style of football, with the counterattack springing really quickly between the likes of Lamine Yamal and Rafinha, Inter's going to have a lot to worry about, especially after just having played this cup game against Milan as well. They're going to be tired for this weekend's game against Roma, and Barcelona is not going to be a piece of cake. They're not going to allow themselves to have to drop to the tempo that Inter wants to play at in the way that Bayern Munich did. And so it's going to be different. It's definitely going to be different. But Inzaghi has to continue carefully managing his squad's fatigue and the rotations better in order to ensure they don't lose out on the Scudetto. And of course, at the same time, Thuram and Dumfries' injuries that have recently happened obviously don't help, because now he's had to play Correa, who's really unproven, and he hasn't gotten a lot of burn this season, so he's not exactly match sharp as he would be otherwise. And Dumfries, with him out, they've had to play Darmian a lot on the wings. Also, Gianmarco has recently gotten injured a little bit, and so they've had to play Carlos Augusto much more, who hasn't been bad. Him and Gianmarco haven't been terrible, but it's just a little bit of the attacking quality that you're lacking as a result in order to finish games, especially against smaller teams like Parma, who they really struggled against at the end of that match. So they just have to manage it better. With Juve, the X factor for their final push of the season is going to be revitalizing Vlahovic. He's been one of the biggest beneficiaries so far of Igor Tudor's appointment, because he's found more consistent minutes once again. Obviously, this didn't reflect in Juve's last game, where he came off at halftime. But for the most part, he did manage to get more minutes, especially more than he was getting under Thiago Motta, who essentially exonerated him out of the squad. And Vlahovic, it really seemed like he was feeling a lot of pressure under Motta, because Motta was showing this willingness to drop him that really made him desperate to score in order to prove himself, right? And this led him to taking an insane amount of outlandish, low XG shots, usually from outside the box. And if you take away the 4 penalties that he scored this season, Vlahovic, as a striker, has the worst XG underperformance in the league. The entire league. 620 plus players have a better XG to goals performance than Vlahovic. And if you're the focal point of a team whose ambitions are as high as Juventus, that can't be happening. This season really reminds me of the season Tammy Abraham had for Roma 2 years ago. After his first season where he performed really well, he had a really bad season of just missing a lot of chances and everything. And yeah, the fact that this is happening to Vlahovic in a system where, you know, he was going to be a Xerxes type role in Motta's system, it's really strange, because he has all the characteristics to play as a great deep lying forward that plays with his back to goal. and gets his teammates involved in the play because he's strong, he can hold up the ball well. He's not the best passer in the world, but he can pass the ball accurately, as he's shown in these last couple of games. So yeah, it's been a really frustrating season for him, especially after seeing Kolomwani come in and rip it up in those 5 games where he had a start. And yeah, Vlahovic just needs to, Juve and Tudor need to find a way to get him more involved and get him scoring goals again. Because while this willingness to play Vlahovic has opened the striker to some more confidence, because now that he knows that he has a starting spot in the team almost guaranteed from Tudor, he's shown a lot more willingness to be more composed on the ball, more willingness to passing, which is highlighted by the 3 assists he has in those 4 games under Tudor. It's a much more calm Vlahovic, more, let's say, sharp, more focused. And Juve just has to hope that they can get that not only with passing, but also with shooting from Vlahovic. And that's going to be key to them retaining that Champions League spot, hopefully. Next up, we have Lazio, whose X factor is getting over the hump in home games. While I was researching this, these stats that I'm about to tell you blew my mind. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Listen to this. Despite having one of the best away records in the league this year, Lazio still remain in an awkward position in the table with a serious chance of missing out on Champions League football. This is mostly due to their home record being only the 9th best in the division this year. And that on paper doesn't sound terrible, right? Because 9th best, that's around where they are in the table. Right now they're sitting 6th, so, and they're not a mile off of 9th place Milan. So 9th place home record, you're like, okay, that makes sort of sense. But listen to the form they're currently on while at home. Baroni's squad has only won 1 of their last 9 home matches. 9. For a team whose ambitions are as high as Lazio, winning 1 of your last 9 home games is completely inexcusable. And I feel like this has been completely glossed over by the fact that they have had a great Europa League run. They got unlucky against Bodo Glimt, losing on penalties. They deserved to win that game. It was clear as day. But their away form is also really masking this. And the thing is, they're getting good results away from home. They just beat Genoa this week. They beat Atalanta a couple of weeks ago. They've been playing well at home, away from home. But winning 1 of 9, it just makes you think, if they won a couple more, right now they're only 1 point out of 4th spot. They're only 5 points away from 3rd spot Atalanta. So if they won a couple of more, they could have been with a real strong position of getting Champions League right now. And even that win, that 1 win out of 9 that they got at home, was against Monza. So it was a hammering. They scored 5 goals. So not to take anything away from them, but Monza, it's not like the most unexpected outcome you could have thought of. So yeah, they really need to improve this home form if they want to have a chance of getting Europe this season. With their last 3 home fixtures at the end of the season being Parma, Juve, Lecce, Lazio has to put an end to this dreadful home form. Speaking of Lecce, the X factor we have for them is scoring goals in whatever way they can. Absolutely any. They have the worst attack in the league this season, and that has meant that they found themselves yet again in a relegation battle. As we were mentioning earlier, they're lucky not to be in the relegation zone right now. After Empoli and Venezia drew to each other, if either of those teams won, Lecce would have slipped in here with their loss to Como, and they're in dreadful form. And their attack has been dreadful this whole season. It's not just their form. After Kristovic's 10 goals, which is respectable, for a striker, for a team that's fighting for to stay alive in the division. 10 goals is a good outcome. Kristovic has shown to be the best player, most likely, over there at Lecce. After him, nobody has above 5 goals. for the whole Lecce side, and tied for third top scorer for them. So after Kristovic, third top scorer is still Patrick Dorgu, who left in January for Man United. He's been playing there ever since January. And this is 4 months later, and he's still the third top scorer in the whole team. I mean, even worse, maybe the fact that on the season, only 6 players have scored for them at all. 6 people have scored for Lecce this season. Isn't that insane to think about? I know that you don't expect many defenders or many midfielders to usually score for a team, but the fact that only 6 people have scored a goal for them, it's Kristovic, Pirotti, Tete Morente, who are the 3 attackers. Baschirotto is always a goal-scoring threat because he's a great header of the ball. As we mentioned, Dorgu is tied third, who left in January and is a left back / he played, a left wing a little bit. But then last with 1 goal is Ante Rebic. So 6 players have scored a goal for them. It's incredible to think about. And the fact that they've renewed Gianpaolo's contract, I know his form has not been as bad as Gotti's was. I don't know. At least they haven't renewed his contract, but they've confirmed that they're going to stick with him. So I don't know. It's interesting. But in short, they have to sum up this situation, because if Kristovic doesn't somehow carry this team out, they're going to go down. Out of the teams that are fighting for the relegation, they're in the worst form. They're the worst to watch. They have the worst goal difference, tied with Monza. I don't know how they're not in the relegation zone already. They have to fix this. For Milan, the X factor is understanding their identity and finding consistency. This is a bit of a more broad one. The other factors that we've brought up have all been very, this is what they need to do, otherwise they're going down. This is what they need to do to get Europe. This is it's very superficial, let's say, because in what's been an incredibly inconsistent season for Milan, they've had ups and downs in terms of everything. They've changed their lineup, they've changed their style of play, their formation, their starters, even their coach has changed. Everything has been super inconsistent for them, and one of the biggest, most underrated things for a football club to be able to do well is consistency. And especially when you talk about the individual players, playing a lot of games and having consistent starts throughout a season leads them to perform better, because they'll have better chemistry with their teammates, they'll just perform better. And this team is in desperate need of some of that consistency. So in order to make the most out of the final games that they have remaining, Conceição really needs to find his identity, his style of play, the formation he wants to play, and the players. And it kind of seems like he's been able to do that. It kind of seems like now Milan is going to stick to this 3-4-3 kind of counter-attacking system, where, as the one we were talking about earlier with Teo Hernandez and Jimenez as the wing backs. Jovic seems to be the preferred option up top for now, which is insane considering they signed Santiago Jimenez, who's an incredible striker. To not even try to integrate him as much feels weird for me, and it feels a weird decision from Conceição, but they just need to stick with this play style, and I credit Conceição for doing so, especially after he lost against Atalanta, where in a performance where Milan didn't look incredible, he stuck with it. They played against Inter with it in the cup, and they beat them 3-0. It's really underrated how much consistency you can give a team, so I hope they stick with it. Next up, we have Monza, and the X factor for them is giving the youth a chance. Let's not kid ourselves here. Monza is all but automatically relegated at this point. They have 15 points. They've lost 4 games in a row. One of those was against Venezia. One of those was against Cagliari. So they can't even beat the rivals that they have around them. They're all but mathematically down. And so I think one of the best things that they could do to kind of salvage anything out of this season is giving some of their youngsters who are actually theirs some Serie A experience, because they do have a lot of youngsters, but they don't own a lot of them. A lot of these guys are here on loan. Players like Bianco, for example, he's here on loan, and there's a couple more scattered throughout the team. But the ones that they do own, such as players like Vignato, Forson, and Martins, who haven't really seen the pitch at all, especially Vignato in the second part of the season, he has not really played almost whatsoever. You might as well just give them some Serie A experience. There's no saving this team, unfortunately, as of now. So you might as well try to play them a little bit. Maybe they get some form randomly. You can get their value up in case you do want to sell them before Serie B. Or otherwise, you can bring them with you into Serie B, and having given them some Serie A experience will help them perform better there. I think this is one of the only things that Nesta's team can salvage out of this season. It's been a dreadful season, historically bad. So just try to get anything out of it. And let's see, having had to give Maldini away in January wasn't easy either. Yeah, it's going to be tough. I wonder whether or not they'll manage to keep any of the players that they do own, players like Mota maybe, or Carboni. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. For Napoli, however, we have getting rid of the nerves. In the second half of the season, Napoli have made a huge habit of throwing away these leads and these points that really could have seen them be clearly above Inter right now. They lost a lot of points just because they get nervy, they get really comfortable holding on to small leads. They really just allow the opponents to have the ball a lot of the time, and they never seem to be looking for that extra goal to make their lead bigger. They struggled to score against Monza earlier this week. They almost lost after being up against Bologna, and they would have deservedly lost arguably that game. They essentially didn't play the second half. They were just parked up in their own box the entire second half against Bologna hammering away at them, and they got really lucky not to lose that game, frankly. They barely scraped by Milan. I think Jimenez missed a penalty in that game. They drew against Venezia and Udinese. They lost to Como. They conceded late drawing goals to both Roma and Lazio. It's just been a really up and down second part of the season for Napoli. And now that they have a relatively easier end to the season, especially easier than Inter, while also not having to worry about European competition, considering they play Torino, Lecce, Genoa, Parma, and Cagliari, who are all teams who are either way below their level or not playing for much, Napoli should really close this out. And if you ask me, they're the favorites to win the Scudetto this season, especially considering even though their form as of late isn't stellar, it's still better than Inter's somehow. So yeah, if they manage to get rid of these nerves and actually hold on to their leads and beat the teams that they know they should be beating, I think they're going to win the league. Next up, we have Parma, and they need to bunker down. That's their X factor, just bunker down. Having been one of the worst defensive sides in the league this season and having a very tough final stretch of games, including Lazio, Napoli, and Atalanta, Parma's key to survival is finding some defensive consistency to take precious points away from these big teams. Now, Parma aren't in the worst situation ever. They do have a 6-point gap over the relegation zone, and they are in pretty good form. They've drawn 4 and won 1 of their last 5 games, including this incredible win against Juve, taking points away from Inter and Fiorentina. And even though they did draw to Monza and they did draw to Hellas Verona, at least they're consistently getting points regardless. And considering that they had one of the worst defensive performances of any team towards the start of the season. It's good that now they are finally managing to bunker down. I mean, even Roma scored 5 goals against them, and they don't do that against anyone. So, yeah, if they manage to bunker down and concede less goals and take away points from the big teams as they have been doing in the last couple of games, they should be clear of the relegation, especially considering that they seem to be better against big teams. They've kind of had this sort of Robin Hood season where they take points away from the big teams and give them to all of the bad teams. They've taken points away from the likes of Milan, Bologna, Juve, Lazio, and of course Inter recently, and Fiorentina recently too, as we just said. So considering they do play more big teams, I'm not as afraid of this schedule as I would be for other teams in their sort of range in the standings. They play Lazio, they play Como, they have a really crucial game against Empoli, and then they're playing Napoli and Atalanta to finish off the season. Those 2 games could be a little bit dangerous because those 2 teams are fighting for the title and for European qualification respectively, so those could be a little bit harder. But if Parma keeps up this defensive consistency, they should be good. Next up, we come to Roma, and their X factor for the end of this season is finally getting a win over their rivals. Even though they're currently on a 17-game unbeaten run in the league, which it is insane to say out loud, because for a team of Roma's standards, getting a 17-game unbeaten run is quite insane. But despite this unbeaten run that they've been on, the only European challenging team, or let's call them a top 9 in the league right now, that Roma has beaten was Lazio, which, while it's ideal that they established this tiebreaker over their cross-city rivals, because now if they finish on the same amount of points, considering they're fighting for the same positions, Roma will finish higher than them because of the tiebreaker system. It's still not ideal that they haven't beaten anyone else. The most they've done is draw to any other of the top 9 teams. And considering that this ending to the season they have is providing huge challenges with the likes of Inter and Fiorentina, Atalanta, Milan and Torino, Roma has to come out and finally take points away from some of their rivals if they want any chance of taking European qualification, especially Champions League, which, even though looks unlikely, if they do win some of these more close 6-pointer type of games, they could do it, especially considering Fiorentina and Inter are both busy with European ties in the meantime, so they're going to be tired and likely to rotate. It's going to be an interesting end of the season for them, and they're going to have to do something they haven't done at all this season. So let's see if Ranieri and his team are up for it. Next, Torino. They need to find a source of goals. That's their X factor. I know I've said this one for a couple of different teams, but for Torino especially, I feel like it's always been this same sort of issue. We maybe thought that this season, with a change of manager, that could be a little bit different. Obviously, Juric, who they had before, his playstyle is not well known to be the most fun and exciting brand of football, so many Torino fans had hopes that under Vanoli this could have changed, but it stayed relatively the same. They still can't figure out how to score, and they're solid defensively. Right now they're 18th in the league out of 20 for touches in the opposition box, and they're 14th in big chances created, which for a team that's currently in 10th place, it's just not good enough. And especially if they want to aim to finish in the European spots in the next couple of seasons, they have to figure this out. And of course, the fact that Zapata, who had started the season scoring 3 and 7, got injured, has been terrible for them. He's missed the entire season, so they've had to rely on goal scorers that they didn't think they would have needed to rely on, such as Che Adams, for example. Even worse might have been the form that Sanabria has been on this season. Continuing last season's struggles, he's more and more looking like a one-season wonder nowadays. And it's just not helpful for Torino. And it tells a long story, the fact that some of their main goal scorers that they're relying on right now are Elmas and Casadei, who both got brought in the January transfer window. And the fact that new signings can make such an impact to their offensive game plan, whereas somebody like Sanabria, who's been there for such a long time, is unable to anymore. It's a little bit sad. But hopefully Torino manages, between these two new additions to the team who have been on fire, Elmas scoring 4 goals since his arrival, and Casadei scoring 1 and assisting 1 from midfield, essentially. If they manage to find some more goals, they'll solidify this 10th place finish, which they seem to go for every year nowadays. But hey, it's something. And speaking of the health, we were just talking about Zapata's health. Udinese's main priority right now is health, and the X factor as well should be chance creation. Unfortunately, Udinese were really struggling to find something. We were really struggling to find something for them, as they're really middle of the pack team. So I apologize if it's a little bit of a boring X factor. I know health is not something that a team can really control to many extents. But they really don't excel or underwhelm in anything. Udinese, most of the big statistics, if you go and look up, they're really like in this 14th to 7th range. They're really they're really just a mid-team. And in the last 4 games, however, they've only managed to score once, and it was that long shot that Solé took against Inter. It was really out of the blue, and it's not exactly a source of goals that you want to consistently have to rely upon. And of course, with the injuries that Udinese have recently had, like Luca now, Thauvin has been in and out a little bit for the season. Sanchez has been really inconsistent. Zemura and Touré are also still out. A lot of Udinese's chance creation and goal scoring has gone out as a result of this. And considering Thauvin is out, especially, the best playmaker they have on the pitch available right now is Lovric, who has only created 4 big chances this season. And that's not, again, something that you want to rely upon too much, especially considering the form Udinese find themselves in, losing the last 5 games straight. Let's just say they're lucky that they had a good start to the season, because otherwise this would be looking more and more dreadful by the moment. And if you consider that Thauvin and Luca have had such good seasons and they're both being looked at by bigger teams, it wouldn't surprise me if Udinese don't manage to replace them well and keep replacing them with the likes of Alexis Sanchez. It wouldn't surprise me if they struggle to score more goals next season too. But that's something they have to address right now if they don't want to risk dropping too far in the table. But again, at least they're safe from relegation, not playing for too much, I guess. Lastly, we come to Venezia, and the X factor they need to focus on in order to have a good end to the season and hopefully try to get out of the relegation zone is getting more out of their midfielders. Thanks to the recent performances that Radu, goalkeeper Radu, Kande and captain Idzas have had for Venezia, their backline has really stopped leaking goals, which is a huge sign, because at some points it never looked like they were going to manage to stop leaking goals, but they finally managed. Di Francesco has kind of figured it out now. But as a result of this, they've really struggled kind of at the other end, especially linking their midfield to their attack, considering the formation they play. They play with these wing backs in Ellertson and Zerbin, who kind of act like wing backs sometimes, but sometimes they act like wingers. It's really weird, and they've been asked to do a lot. Di Francesco asked them to do a lot of running, And it therefore creates this really weird link between the midfield and the attack that usually has to go through Nicolussi Caviglia, who, considering this is his breakout season, he's been asked to do a lot for a team fighting against relegation. And obviously this lack of goal scoring has come at the expense of losing Poyanpalo to Palermo in January. That obviously wasn't ideal. They've had a couple of underperforming attackers like Oristanio, who's not managed to hit the ground running as some people thought he would have. And yeah, because they really struggle to get the ball to their attackers, they need to try and get more from their midfielders instead. Some of these include Ellerton and, as we said, Zerbin, who need more goal contributions. Busio as well has been hitting a little bit of form recently, as well as those other two. And while Nicolussi Caviglia has dropped off a little bit in the last couple of games, you can still really see his playmaking prowess. And if they manage to link all of those things at the same time and continue this good bit of form that they've been in, I feel like they have a really good chance at getting themselves out of this relegation spot. The only issue with that is that they do still have to play Milan, they do still have to play Fiorentina and Juve, but with a crucial game in the second last game week against Cagliari, if they have this link between the midfield and the attack figured out, or at least just get more performances out of their midfielders and more, especially goal scoring contributions from them, they could do it. So there it is. That's all 20 teams and their X factors that they need to focus on and to get better in order to have a strong finish to the season. I hope you enjoyed the second section of this podcast. I know I rambled on maybe a bit too long on the game week recap. I'll try to keep those shorter next time. But let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any suggestions of what other weekly topics we could do. I'm open to many. We have a lot of different ideas already for what those could be right now and towards the end of the season. And we also have a lot for what we're going to be able to do during the transfer window as well, in that little bit of a more dead period, let's say. But let me know. Any suggestions are obviously welcome. And once again, if you did enjoy this first episode, you can do a couple of things. As we mentioned, you can drop 5 stars on the podcast. You can maybe add a comment again for any suggestions you may have, or just to let us know that you liked the episode. And don't forget to follow the podcast on Spotify and click the notification bell that's next to it. That way you'll get notified whenever a new episode is uploaded. And having said that, thank you so much for listening to this first episode. It's really been a big step and a lot of work in the background. So we all hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what other suggestions you may have, and we'll catch you next week.